The medical bay lights flickered as Dr. Gina wiped the sweat from her forehead. She had delivered hundreds of babies in her 20 years as a doctor. But something about tonight felt different. The pregnant woman on the bed, Hannah, was breathing hard. Her husband had died 3 months ago in an accident on the ship, and now she was about to give birth alone. "You're doing great," Gina said softly. "Just one more push." Hannah screamed and pushed with all her strength. The first baby came out, then another, and another. Gina's eyes went wide. Twins were common enough, but these kept coming. 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 identical baby boys, all born within minutes of each other. The strange thing was that none of them cried. They just looked around with bright, alert eyes. Their skin was perfect, not a single mark or wrinkle. They looked like tiny porcelain dolls, each one exactly the same as the others. 6 boys, Gina whispered. "Congratulations, Hannah, you have 6 healthy sons." Hannah was too exhausted to speak. She just nodded and closed her eyes. But even in her tiredness, she noticed something odd. The babies were watching her, really watching her, like they understood everything. The starship Infinite Dawn had been traveling through deep space for 2 years. It carried 5,000 people who were looking for a new home on a distant planet. Life on the ship was hard but organized. People worked, ate, slept, and hoped for a better future. But that night, when Hannah's 6 sons were born, something changed. Gina took the babies to the nursery and placed them in separate cribs. She ran all the usual tests. Their heartbeats were strong. Their breathing was normal. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. She called for her assistant, a young nurse named Yoonji. "Have you ever seen babies this calm?" Gina asked. Yoonji shook her head. "No, doctor. Usually newborns cry for hours. These ones haven't made a sound." Over the next few hours, Gina kept checking on the babies. They never closed their eyes, not once. She watched them through the night, waiting for them to fall asleep, but they just lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Their eyes moved together, all 6 pairs turning at the same time, as if controlled by one mind. By morning, Gina was worried. She went to check on Hannah and found her sitting up in bed looking surprisingly fresh. There were no dark circles under her eyes, no signs of the exhaustion that usually followed childbirth. "How are you feeling?" Gina asked. "I feel wonderful," Hannah said with a strange smile. "I haven't slept at all, but I'm not tired." "Isn't that odd?" Gina's stomach tightened. "You haven't slept? Not even for a few minutes?" "No, I tried, but my body just won't let me. It's like I don't need it anymore. And doctor, I feel so strong, so focused. I could run a marathon right now." Gina left the room and went straight to her office. She pulled up Hannah's medical records and compared them to the scans from earlier. Something was different in her brain activity. The part that controlled sleep was completely quiet, as if it had been turned off. She ran to the nursery. The babies were still awake, still moving in perfect synchronization. Gina picked up one of them, a boy Hannah had named Doyoon. The moment she held him, she felt it. A warm wave of energy spread through her body. Her tiredness vanished. Her mind became crystal clear. She could think faster, see more details, hear every tiny sound in the room. She quickly put the baby down and stepped back. The feeling faded slowly, like walking out of warm water into cold air. Her exhaustion returned, and she suddenly realized she hadn't slept in 18 hours. "Yoonji," she called out, "don't touch the babies. Don't get too close to them." "Why? What's wrong?" "I don't know yet, but something is affecting anyone who gets near them." Gina contacted Captain Daehyun, the man in charge of the Infinite Dawn. He arrived 30 minutes later, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked at the 6 babies through the nursery window. "They haven't slept at all?" he asked. "Not once. And neither has their mother." "Captain, I think these children are emitting some kind of energy. Anyone who gets close to them stops needing sleep." Daehyun frowned. "That sounds like a medical miracle. Or a curse," Gina said quietly. "Humans need sleep. Our brains need rest to function properly. If these babies are somehow preventing that, we could have a serious problem." The captain ordered the ship's AI, a system called Echo, to scan the nursery. The results came back an hour later. The babies were producing a low-frequency psychic field that extended about 3 meters in every direction. Anyone inside that field experienced massive changes in their brain chemistry. Their need for sleep disappeared. Their energy levels increased dramatically. But there was something else too, something Echo couldn't quite measure. The field seemed to be linking people together, making them think in similar patterns. "This is beyond my understanding," Daehyun said. "We need to figure out what these children are before this spreads." But it was already too late. Over the next 3 days, every nurse and doctor who worked in the nursery stopped sleeping. Then the security guards outside the room. Then the maintenance workers who cleaned the hallways nearby. The field was growing. Hana named her 6 sons Doyun, Minho, Taehyun, Junho, Seojin, and Hyunwoo. She loved them desperately, but deep down she was terrified. They never cried. They never slept. They barely even blinked. When she fed them, all 6 would turn their heads at the exact same moment. When she sang to them, all 6 would smile together, their tiny faces moving like mirrors of each other. She tried to sleep one night, lying in her quarters with the lights off. But her body refused. Her mind kept racing with thoughts that didn't feel like her own. She got up and went to the nursery where her sons lay in their cribs staring up at her with those perfect, knowing eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. The babies didn't answer. They just watched her with expressions that were far too intelligent for newborns. And in that moment, Hana understood that her life would never be the same. Neither would anyone else's on the ship. The field continued to grow. By the end of the first week, 50 people had stopped sleeping. By the end of the month, it was 200. And the 6 perfect twins just kept watching, waiting, growing stronger every day. 5 years had passed since the birth of the 6 boys. The Infinite Dawn continued its journey through space, but the ship had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The twins had grown into beautiful children with black hair and bright eyes. They still looked exactly alike, and they still had never slept for a single moment. Hana looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She was only 32 years old, but her hair had turned completely gray. Deep lines marked her face. Her hands shook constantly. She had not slept in 5 years. Not 1 hour. Not 1 minute. Her body worked like a machine that never stopped, and she hated it. The psychic field around her sons had grown massive. It now covered almost half of the ship, affecting more than 300 people. At first, everyone thought it was wonderful. Workers could do their jobs for days without stopping. Engineers fixed problems faster. Scientists made discoveries around the clock. The ship's productivity increased by 200%. Captain Daehyun had initially celebrated this change. But now, as he sat in his office reviewing medical reports, he realized they had made a terrible mistake. People were breaking down. Their bodies couldn't handle the constant work. Their minds were starting to crack under the pressure of never resting. Last week, an engineer named Soman had designed new power systems for 72 hours straight. She never ate. She never stopped to drink water. She just kept working until her brain couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed at her desk with a massive stroke. The doctors saved her life, but she would never fully recover. Half of her body was paralyzed now. Then there was Hyejin, the botanist who took care of the ship's gardens. She worked in the hydroponics bay without rest for 4 days. Her hands bled from handling plants and soil. She didn't notice the pain. She couldn't feel it. The psychic field made her ignore all the warning signs her body was sending. When they finally found her, she was unconscious on the floor, her fingers worn down to the bone. The worst part was that people inside the field didn't want to stop. They felt amazing. They felt powerful. They felt like they could do anything. It was only when they collapsed that the truth became clear. The field wasn't giving them strength. It was burning them up from the inside. Gina reviewed the medical data every day. She had been studying the twins for 5 years now, and she still didn't understand how their power worked. The boys were incredibly intelligent. They had started reading at age 2. By age 3, they could solve complex math problems. Now at 5 years old, they were smarter than most adults on the ship. They spoke 5 languages. They understood physics and chemistry. They could discuss philosophy and art with perfect clarity, but they always spoke in unison. When one boy started a sentence, all 6 would finish it together. When one laughed, all 6 laughed at the exact same moment with the exact same tone. They shared every thought, every feeling, every experience. They were not 6 individuals. They were one mind living in 6 bodies. The ship's school tried to separate them into different classes, but it didn't work. The boys would sit in their separate rooms and give identical answers to different questions at the exact same time. Their teacher, a kind woman named Mireille, found it deeply disturbing. She told Gina that teaching them felt like talking to a computer, not children. Hana tried her best to be a good mother. She read stories to her sons every night. She played games with them. She hugged them and told them she loved them. But she knew something was very wrong. She could feel her own mind slipping away piece by piece. Her thoughts didn't feel like her own anymore. Sometimes she would start doing something and realize she didn't remember deciding to do it. Her body just moved, like someone else was controlling it. She went to Gina and begged for help. They sat in the medical bay, and Hana cried for the first time in years. The psychic field usually kept emotions flat and controlled, but in this moment her fear broke through. "I'm losing myself," Hana whispered. "I can feel it happening. My thoughts aren't my own anymore. I look at my sons and I love them, but I'm also terrified of them. What are they doing to me?" Gina held her hand. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Captain Dae-hyun called a meeting with his senior officers. They gathered in the conference room and he laid out the situation clearly. The twins were dangerous. The field was getting stronger every day. If they didn't do something soon, everyone on the ship would be affected. "We need to separate them," said Lieutenant Jiho, the head of security. "Put each boy in a different section of the ship. Maybe that will weaken the field." "And if it doesn't?" asked Mirai. "They're just children. We can't treat them like prisoners." "They're not normal children," Jiho argued. "They're a threat to everyone on this ship." Dae-hyun listened to both sides. He didn't want to hurt the boys, but he also had a responsibility to protect his crew. He made his decision. They would try to separate the twins and place them in special containment rooms that might block the psychic field. The next day, security officers came to Hana's quarters. She knew what they were going to do. She had been warned. The boys stood in a perfect line, holding hands, watching the officers with calm expressions. They didn't look scared. They didn't look angry. They just looked knowing, as if they had expected this. "Please don't hurt them," Hana begged. "We won't," Jiho promised. "We just need to keep everyone safe." The officers approached the boys slowly. They had special equipment designed to block psychic energy, but nobody knew if it would work. Jiho reached out to take Doyun's hand, and that's when everything went wrong. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. A pressure built up inside everyone's head. The psychic field pulsed with enormous power, like a wave crashing against a shore. All 6 boys spoke at the same time, their voices overlapping into one terrible sound. "No!" The security officers dropped to the floor, unconscious. Jiho fell backward, clutching his head. Hana screamed. The boys just stood there, still holding hands, still perfectly calm. The message was clear. Nobody would separate them. Nobody could. Gina rushed to the scene and checked the fallen officers. They were alive but deeply unconscious. It took them 3 hours to wake up, and when they did, they couldn't remember what had happened. The psychic field had wiped their memories of the event. Captain Dae-hyun realized they had a much bigger problem than he thought. The twins weren't just passive sources of energy. They could actively use their power to defend themselves. And if they could knock out trained security officers, what else could they do? That night, Hana sat with her sons in their room. They ate dinner together, all 6 boys chewing in perfect synchronization. She watched them and felt a deep sadness in her heart. She loved her children, but she didn't know them. She didn't understand them. And she was starting to think that nobody ever would. "Do you know what you did today?" she asked quietly. All 6 boys looked at her with their bright, knowing eyes. They spoke together in their unified voice. "Yes, Mother. We protected ourselves. We won't be separated. We need to stay together, always together." Hana's hands trembled. "But you hurt people. They will be fine. We only made them sleep. We wish we could sleep too." For the first time, Hana heard something new in their voice. Sadness, loneliness, fear. Her sons weren't monsters. They were trapped in something they didn't understand, just like everyone else. But that didn't make them any less dangerous. Dr. Minji had been the ship's xenobiologist for 6 years. She studied alien life forms and analyzed anything strange the Infinite Dawn encountered in deep space. When Captain Dae-hyun asked her to investigate the twins, she agreed immediately. This was the most fascinating mystery she had ever faced. She started by reviewing the ship's travel logs. Where had they been when Hana got pregnant? What had they passed through? The answers were all stored in the ship's database, and Minji spent weeks going through every detail. 3 months before the twins were born, the Infinite Dawn had passed close to a derelict alien probe. It was old, maybe thousands of years old, just floating in space. The crew had scanned it briefly but decided it wasn't worth investigating. They had a schedule to keep, but the probe had been sending out some kind of radiation. Very faint, very strange. The ship's sensors had recorded it, but nobody had paid attention at the time. Minji pulled up the radiation data and studied it carefully. It wasn't normal radiation. It carried patterns like information encoded in waves. She ran it through the translation systems and waited. The computer worked for 3 days before producing results. The probe had belonged to something called the Velithran Empire. Minji had never heard of them. She searched through every database the ship had, looking for any mention of this civilization. Finally, she found a small reference in an old academic paper. The Velithrans had been a powerful race that controlled 3 galaxies millions of years ago. But they were extinct now. Completely gone. Nobody knew what had happened to them. The probe's files were damaged and corrupted, but Minji managed to recover some fragments. What she found made her blood run cold. The files contained scientific research about something called the Eternal Children. It was a biological weapon the Velithrans had created. The weapon was designed to conquer other species without fighting them. The Eternal Children would be born to members of the target species. These children would emit a psychic field that removed the need for sleep. At first, this would seem like a gift. People would work harder, accomplish more, feel stronger. But slowly, over time, the field would take over their minds. They would lose their individuality. They would become part of a hive mind controlled by the children. The Velithrans had tested this weapon on several species. It worked perfectly. Entire planets fell under the control of the Eternal Children within a few years. Populations became armies of tireless workers who served the Empire without question. It was the perfect conquest tool. But then something went wrong. The Eternal Children became too powerful. They started affecting the Velithrans themselves. The creators lost control of their own weapon. The children spread across Velithran space, and within a century the entire empire had fallen. Billions of beings worked themselves to death under the influence of the psychic field. Civilizations collapsed. Planets became graveyards. The last surviving Velithrans tried to destroy the project. They hunted down every eternal child and killed them. They destroyed all the research. But they couldn't erase the genetic code completely. Fragments of it escaped into space, carried by radiation from their experiments. That radiation could drift for millions of years, waiting to find a compatible host. Minji realized what had happened. When the Infinite Dawn passed the probe, that ancient radiation had reached Hana while she was pregnant. It had infected her unborn children and rewritten their genetic code. The twins weren't a natural miracle. They were the rebirth of a weapon that had destroyed an entire civilization. She took her findings to Captain Daehyun immediately. They met in his private office, and she showed him everything she had discovered. The captain's face grew darker with every page he read. "How long do we have?" he asked quietly. Minji pulled up her calculations. The psychic field is growing at a steady rate. Right now it covers about 40% of the ship. In 2 years it will cover everything. Everyone on board will be affected. And when we land on the colony planet, if the twins come with us, the field will keep growing. Within 5 years, it could cover the entire planet. Within 10 years, maybe more. "We have 5,000 people on this ship," Daehyun said. "And the colony planet is supposed to be home to 100,000 within the next decade. Are you telling me all of them will become slaves to these children?" "Not slaves exactly. But yes, they'll lose their free will. They'll become part of the hive mind. They'll work until their bodies give out, and they won't even realize what's happening to them. That's what happened to the Velithrans. That's what will happen to us." Daehyun stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the stars, at the vast emptiness of space. He had led this colony mission for 7 years. He had promised these people a new home, a new life. Now he might have to make the hardest decision of his life. "We could kill them," he said softly. "The twins. If we terminated them now, the field would disappear. Everyone would go back to normal." Minji felt sick at the thought. "They're just children, Captain. 5-year-old boys. They didn't ask to be weapons. I know, but if we don't stop them, they'll destroy humanity's future in this sector. How many lives are 6 lives worth? 6 versus 100,000? 6 versus millions?" The question hung in the air between them. Minji didn't have an answer. She had spent her whole career studying alien life, searching for ways humans could coexist with other species. But this was different. This wasn't about coexistence. This was about survival. "There might be another way," she said. "The Velithrans must have had some method of controlling the children before they lost power." Maybe there's a cure. Maybe there's a way to remove the genetic code without killing the boys. Do you have any evidence of that? No, but I've only recovered a fraction of the probe's data. There could be more information hidden in the corrupted files. Give me time. Let me keep searching. Daehyun nodded slowly. You have 2 months. Find me a solution, or I'll have to make the choice myself. Minji left his office and went straight back to her lab. She worked 20 hours a day, digging through the probe's files. The psychic field had reached her section of the ship now, so she never needed sleep. Her mind was sharp and focused, but she knew that focus came at a terrible price. She was becoming part of the problem she was trying to solve. 3 weeks later, she found something, a reference to a ritual called the Severance. The files were heavily damaged, but she could make out some details. The Velethrons had discovered a way to separate the eternal children from the hive code. It was a form of psychic surgery that required 3 things. First, a psychic anchor, someone the children trusted completely, someone who could guide them through the process. Second, a neural resonator, a device that could channel and redirect psychic energy. Third, and most important, the children themselves had to want the severance. They had to willingly give up their power. Minji read the files over and over. The procedure was dangerous. It could kill the children. It could leave them brain damaged. It could fail completely and make things worse. But it was a chance. It was hope. She brought her findings to Daehyun and Gina. They read through everything carefully. Gina pointed out the biggest problem right away. The psychic anchor has to be someone the boys trust completely. That means Hana, but she's been in the field for 5 years. Her mind is already compromised. I don't think she can handle this kind of strain. What about someone outside the field? Daehyun suggested. There's no one, Minji said. The boys have only ever known people inside the field. Everyone they've ever met has been affected. They don't trust anyone outside of it because they've never had the chance to meet them. The 3 of them sat in silence, trying to find a solution. The answer would come, but not from where any of them expected. It would come from a damaged alien freighter and a gentle 4-armed being who simply wanted to help. The distress signal came from nowhere. One moment the Infinite Dawn was traveling smoothly through empty space, and the next moment the ship's sensors picked up a weak emergency beacon. Captain Daehyun ordered a course change. They found the source quickly, a small alien freighter that looked like it had been through a terrible fight. The hull was torn open in several places. No life support, no power, but the sensors showed one life sign inside. The rescue team brought the survivor aboard carefully. She was small, about the size of a human teenager, with soft blue skin and 4 arms. Her species was called Kuvari, and they were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful beings who worked as household helpers and caregivers. They had a reputation for being gentle, patient, and incredibly good at understanding emotional needs. The survivor's name was Neela. She spoke perfect human language, which was common for Kuvari since they made their living by serving other species. When she woke up in the medical bay, she thanked everyone repeatedly and asked very politely if she could stay on the ship. Her freighter was destroyed and she had nowhere else to go. Captain Daehyun agreed immediately. The Infinite Dawn needed all the help it could get, and Nyla seemed harmless. She was assigned to work as a household assistant for several families who needed extra support. The pay wasn't much, but Neela didn't seem to care. She was just grateful to be alive. Neela was everything people said about Kuvari. She was kind, soft-spoken, and incredibly hard-working. With her 4 arms, she could do tasks twice as fast as humans. She cleaned homes, cooked meals, took care of children, and did it all with a smile. Everyone who met her liked her immediately. 3 weeks after she arrived, Neela was assigned to help Hana. The mother of 6 boys was struggling badly. She looked exhausted even though she couldn't sleep. Her hands shook all the time. She sometimes forgot to eat for days. The captain thought having extra help might make her life easier. When Neela first entered Hana's quarters, something strange happened. Hana had been standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing with empty eyes. But the moment Neela walked in, Hana gasped and grabbed the counter for support. Her legs felt weak. Her eyes suddenly felt heavy. For the first time in 5 years, she felt genuinely tired. "Are you okay?" Neela asked, rushing over with concern. "I don't know," Hana whispered. "I feel strange, weak, like I'm going to collapse. Sit down. I'll make you some tea." As Neela worked in the kitchen, Hana sat on the couch and tried to understand what was happening. The constant buzzing in her head had quieted. Her thoughts felt clearer, more like her own. The fog that had been covering her mind for years was lifting, just a little bit. That evening, Neela met the 6 boys. They were sitting in their room, reading books in perfect synchronization. When she opened the door, all 6 heads turned at the exact same moment to look at her. Their eyes, usually so knowing and intense, showed something Neela had never expected to see. Confusion. The boys stood up together and walked toward her slowly. They stopped a few feet away, studying her with tilted heads. For the first time in their lives, their movements weren't perfectly synchronized. Doyen took a step forward. Minho stayed still. Taehyun reached out one hand, then pulled it back. "Hello," Neela said gently. "My name is Neela. I'm here to help your mother. What are your names?" The boys opened their mouths to speak in unison, but something stopped them. They looked at each other, confused. Finally, Doyen spoke alone. "I'm Doyen." The other boys stared at him in shock. They had never heard just one of them speak before. Then Minho spoke, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm Minho." One by one, the others introduced themselves. Taehyun, Juno, Seojin, Hyunwoo. 6 separate voices instead of one unified sound. When they finished, they looked frightened, like they had done something wrong. Neela smiled at them warmly. "It's very nice to meet all of you. Would you like me to read you a story?" The boys nodded and sat down on the floor. Neela sat with them and pulled out a book she had brought from her home world. It was a story about a small creature who learned to fly. She read in a soft, gentle voice, using her 4 hands to show them pictures and make gestures that brought the story to life. The boys watched her with fascination. They weren't thinking about math or science or philosophy. They were just listening to a story like normal children. When Neela finished, Doyen did something he had never done before. He smiled a smile that was different from his brother's smiles. "That was nice," he said. "Can you read another one?" Over the next few days, Dr. Gina studied what was happening. She ran scans on everyone who spent time near Neela. The results were shocking. The Kuvari woman was somehow dampening the psychic field, not eliminating it completely but weakening it significantly. People who spent time with Neela found their minds clearing. They could think independently again. They could feel tired. They could make their own choices. Gina brought Minji and Captain Daehyun to her lab to show them the data. They stood around the monitor looking at brain scans that showed the difference between people inside the field and people near Neela. "It's her biology," Minji explained. "Kuvari evolved to work with dozens of different species. Many of those species used psychic abilities to communicate. The Kuvari developed a natural defense against psychic manipulation. They have a kind of dampening field of their own. It protects them from being mentally controlled by the beings they serve." "So she's immune to the twins?" Daehyun asked. "Not immune, more like resistant. And her presence creates a bubble where other people can resist too. It's not a cure, but it's something. It's more than we had before." They decided to have Neela spend as much time as possible with the twins. She moved into Hana's quarters permanently and took over most of the child care duties. Hana was grateful beyond words. With Neela around, she could finally think clearly. She could sleep for short periods. She started to feel like herself again. Neela treated the boys like they were normal children. She didn't fear them. She didn't treat them like weapons or monsters. She played games with them, taught them to draw, took them for walks around the ship. Slowly, the boys began to change. Doyen discovered he loved art. He would spend hours drawing pictures of stars and planets and creatures from Neela's stories. Minho became fascinated with how things worked. He asked endless questions about the ship's engines and systems. Taehyun liked music and would hum little songs he made up. Unyo was quiet and thoughtful, always watching and thinking. Seojin loved jokes and tried to make everyone laugh. Hyunwoo was gentle and caring, always asking if people were okay. They were becoming individuals. Not completely separate, their minds were still connected, but they were developing their own personalities, their own interests, their own voices. For the first time, they felt like 6 different people instead of one consciousness split 6 ways. But Gina knew this wasn't a permanent solution. Neela could only dampen the field in her immediate area. The moment she left, the boys' power would surge back, and the field was still growing. It now covered 60% of the ship. They were running out of time. One night, Neela sat with the boys in their room. They had just finished dinner and were getting ready for bed, though they still couldn't sleep. She looked at their faces, so young and innocent, and felt a deep sadness. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. The boys nodded. "Do you like being the way you are? Do you like never sleeping? Do you like being connected all the time?" The boys looked at each other. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Taehyun, the one who loved music, said something that broke Neela's heart. "We don't know what else we could be. This is all we've ever known. But sometimes when you read us stories about children who sleep and dream, we wonder what that's like. We wonder what it would feel like to be alone in our own heads, to have thoughts that are just ours. But we're scared. What if being separate means being lonely? What if we lose each other?" Neela reached out and held their hands. "Being individual doesn't mean being alone. It means being yourself while still loving and caring for others. You can be separate and still be brothers. Still be family? Is there a way?" Minyo asked. "Can we be fixed?" "I don't know," Neela admitted. "But I promise you I'll try to find out." That promise would lead to the most important discovery of all. Lieutenant Jiho stood in the ship's main corridor, watching workers move past him with mechanical precision. They walked in straight lines, their faces blank and focused. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't laugh or joke. They just worked, constantly worked, driven by the psychic field that now covered 70% of the infinite dawn. But Jiho wasn't disturbed by this. He felt proud. He felt powerful. He hadn't slept in 3 years, and every day he felt stronger, smarter, more capable than ever before. The old Jiho had been weak, needed rest, wasted time. This new version was perfect. And it was all because of the 6 boys. Over the past few months, Jiho had gathered others who felt the same way. They called themselves the Awakened. There were about 50 of them now, all people who had spent years inside the psychic field and had come to see it as a gift, not a curse. They met in secret, sharing their thoughts and beliefs. "Captain Daehyun wants to stop them," Jiho told his followers during one of their meetings. "He wants to separate the boys, maybe even kill them. He calls their power a curse. But we know better. This is evolution. This is humanity's next step. We should be protecting those children, not treating them like threats." A woman named Boyoung nodded enthusiastically. She was an engineer who had been working without rest for 2 years. "The captain is old-fashioned. He doesn't understand that we don't need sleep. Sleep is weakness. Sleep is wasted time. The boys have freed us from that prison." Others agreed. They had convinced themselves that the psychic field was making them better. They ignored the people who had collapsed from exhaustion. They ignored the evidence of mental deterioration. They only saw the increased productivity, the heightened focus, the feeling of limitless energy. The field had rewritten their thoughts so completely that they couldn't see the truth anymore. Jiho learned that Dr. Minji had discovered something called the severance, a procedure that might remove the boys' power. He also learned that Neela, the alien helper, was somehow weakening the field around the twins. This news enraged him and his followers. "They're trying to destroy everything we've become," Jiho said. "We can't let that happen. The boys are the key to humanity's future. We need to protect them." "What do you suggest?" Boyoung asked. "We take control of the ship. We remove Captain Daehyun and anyone who wants to hurt the children. We make sure the boys are safe and we let their power spread naturally. When we reach the colony planet, everyone there will become awakened too. Imagine it. An entire world of people who never need rest, who never waste time sleeping. We'll build a perfect civilization." The group voted and agreed. They would start their rebellion in 3 days, during the ship's night cycle when most of the crew was in their quarters. They had weapons, they had numbers, and they had the absolute confidence that came from the psychic field. They believed they couldn't fail. But someone overheard their plans. A young maintenance worker named Kangmin had been cleaning the air vents above the room where the Awakened met. He heard everything and immediately went to Captain Daehyun. The captain listened to Kangmin's report with growing horror. A civil war on the ship would be a disaster. People would die. Systems would be damaged. The entire colony mission could fail. But he couldn't just arrest the Awakened. They hadn't done anything yet, and they outnumbered his loyal security force. He called an emergency meeting with Gina, Minji, and the other senior officers. They gathered in the secure conference room, and Daehyun explained the situation. "We're running out of time," he said. "The Awakened will move against us soon. Once they do, we'll have a full-scale conflict. We need to act now." "Minji, is the severance procedure ready?" "Almost," Minji said. "We've built the neural resonator. We have the theory worked out. But we still need a psychic anchor, and we still need the boys to agree to it. What about Neela? Gina suggested. The boys trust her. They've opened up to her in ways they never did with anyone else. She could be the anchor. Minji looked uncertain. It's incredibly dangerous. The anchor will absorb massive amounts of psychic energy during the procedure. It could kill her, and we don't know if a Kuvari biology can handle it. All the Velathron records were about their own species. We don't have another option, Daehyun said. We need to try. They brought Neela to the meeting and explained everything. They told her about the Awakened, about the rebellion, about the severance procedure. They showed her the risks, the dangers, the chance that she might die. When they finished, Neela sat quietly for a moment, her 4 hands folded in her lap. Will this save the boys? She asked. It might, Gina said. Or it might kill them. We honestly don't know. But if we don't try, what happens? The Awakened will protect the boys and let the field spread. Eventually, everyone on the ship and everyone on the colony planet will lose their free will. Humanity in this sector will effectively end. Neela nodded slowly. Then we have to try. I'll do it. I'll be the anchor. They didn't have much time to prepare. The Awakened were planning to move in 2 days. Daehyun ordered the ship's loyal security forces to prepare for possible conflict. He also ordered that the boys be moved to the medical bay, which had reinforced doors and better security. When Jiho heard about the move, he knew their plan had been discovered. He gathered the Awakened immediately and decided to act early. They armed themselves with tools and weapons from the ship's storage. They moved through the corridors in organized groups, taking control of key systems. The rebellion began at midnight. The Awakened seized the engine room, the communications center, and the main power systems. Captain Daehyun responded by sealing off the bridge and the medical bay. His loyal crew members, those who were either outside the psychic field or strong enough to resist its influence, prepared to defend critical areas. Neela was with the boys in the medical bay when the fighting started. They could hear shouting and the sound of weapons firing in the distance. The twins sat together on a large bed holding hands, their faces calm but their eyes showing fear. What's happening? Doyen asked. Some people want to keep you the way you are, Neela explained gently. Other people want to help you change. And they're fighting about it. Because of us, Minho said sadly. People are hurting each other because of us. It's not your fault, Neela said firmly. None of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be born this way. But we have the power to stop it, Taehyun said. We could use our field to make everyone calm down. We could control them. Would you want that? Neela asked. Would you want to take away their choice, their free will? The boys looked at each other, their minds touching in that way only they could understand. Finally, all 6 of them spoke. Not in unison, but one after another. No, we don't want to control people. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to be normal. We want to sleep. We want to dream. Neela felt tears in her eyes. She knelt down and looked at all 6 boys. Then we need to do the severance. It's risky. It might not work. But it's the only way to free you from this power. Are you brave enough to try? The boys were quiet for a long moment. They were scared. The psychic field was all they had ever known. Letting go of it felt like dying. But they were also tired. So very tired of being different, of being feared, of causing so much pain. We'll try, they said together. Outside the medical bay, the fighting was getting worse. The Awakened had reached the corridor and were trying to break through the reinforced doors. Captain Daehyun and his security team were holding them back, but they couldn't hold forever. Gina and Minji prepared the neural resonator, a strange device that looked like a crown made of wires and crystal. They set it up in the center of the medical bay with 6 small chairs arranged in a circle around it. We need to start now, Minji said. Before the Awakened breakthrough, Neela nodded. She helped the boys into their chairs and then sat in the middle of the circle. The neural resonator was placed on her head. Gina activated the device and immediately everyone in the room felt a surge of energy. The psychic field, usually invisible, became almost visible in that moment, like waves of heat shimmering in the air. The severance had begun. The neural resonator hummed with power as Neela sat at the center of the circle. The 6 boys sat around her, each one connected to the device by thin wires that glowed with soft blue light. The psychic field in the room intensified, pressing down on everyone like a physical weight. Dr. Gina watched the monitors carefully. Brain activity in all 7 subjects was increasing rapidly. The boys' minds were connected not just to each other now, but to Neela as well. She could feel their thoughts, their fears, their memories flowing into her consciousness. "How does it feel?" Minji asked Neela. "Like I'm drowning in an ocean of thoughts," Neela whispered. Her voice was strained. "There's so much." So many voices. Not just the boys. I can hear echoes of something older. Something ancient. She was experiencing what the Velithran files had described. The psychic field wasn't just connecting the boys to each other. It was connecting them to the original eternal children from millions of years ago. The genetic code carried memories, fragments of consciousness from every being who had ever been infected by the Velithran weapon. Neela saw flashes of alien worlds. She saw the Velithran Empire at its height, beautiful cities made of crystal and light. She saw the first eternal children being created in laboratories, scientists celebrating their success. Then she saw everything go wrong. The children's power growing beyond control, planets falling silent as entire populations became mindless workers, the Velithrans trying desperately to stop what they had created, destroying their own children to save their civilization. But it was too late. The weapon had spread too far. The empire collapsed. Billions died. And in the end, the Velithrans made one final decision. They couldn't destroy the genetic code completely, but they could hide a cure within it. A backdoor, a way to undo what they had done. They called it the severance. "I can see it," Neela said, her eyes closed. "I can see how it works. The code is like a chain wrapped around their minds. We need to break each link one at a time. But the boys have to let go. They have to choose to be free." She reached out with her mind, touching each boy's consciousness individually. She started with Doyen, the one who loved to draw. His mind was full of colors and shapes, but underneath all that beauty was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing his brothers. "Doyen," Neela said softly in her mind, "you don't have to be afraid. Being separate doesn't mean being alone. You'll still have your brothers. You'll still have your mother. But you'll also have yourself. Your own thoughts. Your own dreams." "I don't know how to dream," Doyen's mental voice said. "I'll show you." Neela shared a memory from her childhood on her homeworld. She showed him what it felt like to fall asleep under a night sky with 2 moons. She showed him the strange, wonderful confusion of dreams where anything could happen and reality didn't matter. She showed him the peace of waking up refreshed, ready for a new day. Doyen's fear began to fade. He reached toward that feeling, that promise of rest. And as he did, the first link in the chain broke. His connection to the psychic field weakened. Gina saw it on the monitors, his brain patterns shifting, becoming more independent. One by one, Neela guided each boy through the same process. She showed Minho what it felt like to figure something out on your own, without instantly knowing the answer because his brothers knew it. She showed Taehyun what it was like to create music that came from his own heart, not from a shared consciousness. She showed Junho the beauty of quiet solitude, of sitting alone with your thoughts. With each boy that let go, the psychic field in the room weakened, but it also fought back. The ancient code didn't want to die. It pushed against Neela, flooding her mind with terrible visions. She saw herself being torn apart. She saw the boys dying. She saw the infinite dawn destroyed. "Don't listen to it," Minji said urgently, watching Neela's body start to shake. "Those are just fear responses. The code is trying to protect itself." Neela gritted her teeth and pushed through the visions. She reached for Seojin and Hyunwoo, the last 2 boys who were still fully connected. They were resisting harder than the others. They had been born last, and somehow their connection to the code was stronger. "Please," Neela begged them mentally. "Please let go. You deserve to be free. You deserve to be yourselves." "We're scared," they said together. "What if we're nothing without this power? What if we're not special anymore?" "You've always been special," Neela told them. "Not because of the power, but because you're you. 6 beautiful boys with kind hearts and curious minds. The power is just a prison. Let me help you break free." She poured all her love and compassion into those words. She showed them how proud she was of them, how much she cared. And slowly, gradually, their resistance crumbled. The last 2 links broke, but breaking the links was only half the process. Now came the dangerous part. All that psychic energy had to go somewhere. The neural resonator began pulling it out of the boys, channeling it through the wires into Neela. Her job was to absorb it and disperse it harmlessly using her Kuveri dampening abilities. The energy hit her like a hammer. Pain exploded through her body. It felt like her mind was being ripped apart and put back together wrong. She screamed, and all four of her hands clutched the chair she was sitting on so hard the metal bent. "Her vitals are dropping," Gina shouted. "Heart rate at 180. Blood pressure critical. She can't take much more of this." "We can't stop now," Minji said. "If we stop halfway through, the boys will die and Neela will die. We have to finish." Outside the medical bay, the fighting had reached a critical point. The Awakened had broken through the first security door. Captain Daehyun and his team were falling back to the second door, firing stun weapons to keep the attackers at bay. "How much longer?" Daehyun shouted into his communicator. 5 minutes, Minji responded. "Just hold for 5 more minutes." But the Awakened weren't waiting. Jiho stood at the front of the group, his eyes wild with desperation. He could feel the psychic field weakening. He could feel his connection to the boys fading. It felt like dying. "Break through now," he screamed. "Save the children." The Awakened charged forward with renewed fury. They overwhelmed the second security door, and Daehyun knew they were out of time. He positioned himself directly in front of the medical bay entrance, weapon raised. "I won't let you stop this," he said firmly. "Those boys deserve a chance at normal lives. They're perfect the way they are." Jiho shouted back. "You're destroying humanity's future." "I'm saving it," Daehyun replied. Inside the medical bay, Neela was reaching her limit. The psychic energy was too much. Her Kuvari dampening abilities were strong, but not strong enough for this. Blood dripped from her nose. Her skin was turning pale. The monitors showed her body starting to shut down. "She's dying," Gina said, her voice breaking. "We need to stop." "No," Neela gasped. "Finish it. Save them." The 6 boys opened their eyes. For the first time in their lives, they weren't synchronized. Each one looked different, moved different, thought different. They saw Neela suffering to save them, and they understood what real sacrifice meant. "Let us help," they said, each in their own voice. The boys reached out mentally, not to Neela, but to each other. They formed a new connection, not the forced hive mind of the psychic field, but a voluntary bond between brothers. They took some of the energy burden from Neela and shared it among themselves. 6 minds were stronger than one. The neural resonator flared with brilliant light. The psychic field that had covered 70% of the ship suddenly collapsed. Every person who had been under its influence gasped as their minds cleared. The Awakened stopped charging forward, confusion replacing their certainty. Jiho fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he realized what he had almost done. In the medical bay, the light from the neural resonator faded. Neela collapsed forward unconscious. The 6 boys slumped in their chairs, completely still. For a terrible moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Doyen's chest rose. He took a breath. Then another. His eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in his life, they looked tired. Beautifully, perfectly tired. One by one, his brothers woke up too. "Did it work?" Junyo whispered. Gina checked the monitors with shaking hands. The boys' brain patterns were completely different now. Individual, independent, normal. The genetic code was gone. The psychic field was gone. They were free. "It worked," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. It actually worked. The boys looked at each other with wonder. Their minds were separate now, but they could still feel a small thread of connection, a bond that came from being brothers, not from being weapons. It felt right. It felt natural. But their celebration was cut short when they saw Neela lying motionless on the floor. "Neela!" Doyen scrambled out of his chair and fell to his knees beside her. His legs were weak, unused to normal fatigue, but he crawled to her anyway. His brothers followed, surrounding her body with trembling hands. Dr. Gina rushed to check Neela's vital signs. Her heart was beating barely. Her breathing was shallow. The neural resonator had channeled too much energy through her body. Her Kuvari biology had protected her from the worst of it, but she was badly hurt. "Get her on the medical bed now," Gina ordered. Captain Daehyun entered the room. The fighting outside had stopped. The Awakened had collapsed when the psychic field disappeared. Their minds suddenly flooded with clarity and the horrifying realization of what they had been about to do. Some were crying. Some were in shock. Jiho was being held by security, but he wasn't resisting. He just stared at the floor with empty eyes. "What happened here?" Daehyun asked, looking at the scene. "The severance worked," Minji explained. "The boys are free." But Neela absorbed too much energy. "I don't know if she'll survive." Hana burst into the room, having heard the news. She ran to her sons and wrapped them in her arms. All 6 boys, for the first time in their lives, hugged her back with genuine emotion. They were crying. They were scared. They were children. "Mom," Minho whispered. "We're so tired." "I know, baby," Hana said, tears streaming down her face. "You can sleep now. You can finally sleep." But none of the boys would sleep until they knew Neela was okay. They sat beside her medical bed, watching as Gina and her team worked to stabilize her. Hours passed. The boys fought against their exhaustion, their eyes drooping, their bodies begging for rest. But they held hands and stayed awake together, waiting. Throughout the ship, people were recovering from the psychic field's influence. Those who had been affected for years felt like they were waking from a long nightmare. They remembered everything they had done, every moment of lost free will, and the guilt was overwhelming. Counseling teams were working around the clock to help people process their trauma. The awakened were placed in a secure area, not as prisoners but as patients. They had been the most deeply affected by the field, and their recovery would take the longest. Jiho sat in his cell staring at his hands. He had almost started a civil war. He had almost killed children. He had thought he was enlightened, evolved, better than everyone else. Now he understood he had been enslaved. The shame was crushing. Back in the medical bay, Neela's vital signs slowly began to improve. Her Kuvari physiology was remarkably resilient. The damage to her neural pathways was healing faster than Gina had expected. After 8 hours, her eyes finally opened. The first thing she saw was 6 tired faces looking down at her with concern. The boys were holding her hands with their small fingers. When they saw her awake, they smiled with relief. "You're okay," Taehyun said softly. "Are you okay?" Neela asked, her voice weak. "We're free," Seojin told her. "Because of you." "We can be ourselves now," Hyunwoo added. Neela smiled and tears ran down her blue cheeks. "Good, that's good." "We're also really, really tired," Doyun admitted. "Then you should sleep," Neela said gently. "Will you stay with us?" Hunyo asked. "We've never slept before. We don't know how. We're a little scared." Neela looked at Dr. Gina, who nodded permission. With help, Neela moved to a chair beside the boys' beds. They each climbed into their own bed, 6 separate spaces for 6 separate people. But they pushed the beds close together so they could still see each other. Neela began to sing a Kuvari lullaby, the same one that had helped them let go during the severance. Her voice was soft and melodic, and it spoke of gentle things like starlight, quiet winds, and peaceful dreams. The boys listened, their eyes growing heavy. Minho was the first to fall asleep. His breathing became slow and steady. Then Seojin, then Taehyun. One by one, the 6 boys drifted off into their first sleep. Their faces relaxed, their bodies finally rested, and in their minds they began to dream. Doyun dreamed of painting a picture so large it covered an entire wall. Minho dreamed of taking apart a spaceship engine and understanding every piece. Taehyun dreamed of composing a symphony that made people cry with joy. Hunyo dreamed of reading in a quiet library with warm sunlight. Seojin dreamed of making his brothers laugh. Hyunwoo dreamed of taking care of a garden full of strange and beautiful plants. They were separate dreams, individual and unique, but in some deep way they were also connected. The boys could still sense each other, feel each other's presence. They weren't alone. They were brothers, and that bond was stronger than any psychic field because they had chosen it themselves. Hana sat beside Neela, watching her sons sleep. She looked younger already. The gray in her hair seemed less pronounced. The lines on her face were softening. Without the psychic field, her body could finally begin to heal from 5 years of forced wakefulness. "Thank you," she whispered to Neela. "You gave me my sons back. The real versions of them. You gave them a chance to be children." "They were always children," Neela replied. "They were just trapped. I'm glad I could help them escape." Captain Daehyun visited the medical bay later that evening. He looked exhausted. The crisis was over, but the aftermath would take months to resolve. The awakened needed rehabilitation. The ship's systems needed repairs, and they still had to decide what to do when they reached the colony planet. "How are they?" he asked Gina, sleeping peacefully. "All their vital signs are normal. They're just regular boys now. And Neela? She'll need a few weeks to fully recover, but she'll be fine. Her species is tougher than they look." Daehyun turned to Neela and gave her a respectful bow. "You saved this ship. You saved humanity's future in this sector. I owe you a debt I can never repay." I don't need payment, Neela said with a gentle smile. I just wanted to help. Nevertheless, I'd like to offer you a permanent position on the Infinite Dawn. Not as a household assistant, but as our ship's counselor. We're going to need someone to help people recover from this trauma. Someone who understands both the scientific and emotional aspects of what happened. Would you accept? Neela looked at the sleeping boys, then at Hana, then back at the captain. She thought about her destroyed freighter, about having no home to return to. But here on this ship, she had found something more valuable than a home. She had found purpose. I accept, she said. The next few weeks were difficult for everyone on the Infinite Dawn. People struggled with the memories of what they had done under the psychic field's influence. Relationships needed to be rebuilt. Trust needed to be restored. But slowly, gradually, the ship began to heal. The 6 boys adapted to their new lives with remarkable resilience. They learned to sleep every night, and they loved it. They discovered that dreams were strange and wonderful and sometimes scary, but always interesting. They learned to be apart from each other, to spend time alone, to have private thoughts. But they also learned that they could come together whenever they wanted, not because a psychic field forced them, but because they were family. Doyen started art classes and covered his room with drawings. Minho spent hours in the engine room asking questions and learning how everything worked. Taehyun joined the ship's small music ensemble. Junyo found a love for reading and literature. Seojin became the class clown in school, always finding ways to make people laugh. Yunwoo volunteered in the hydroponics bay, caring for plants with gentle dedication. They were individuals, but they were also brothers. And that made them stronger than they had ever been under the psychic field. Neela became beloved by everyone on the ship. She helped people work through their trauma with patience and compassion. She never judged anyone for what they had done while under the field's influence. She understood that they had been victims, not villains. Her office was always open, and people came to her with their fears, their guilt, their questions. 6 months after the severance, the Infinite Dawn finally reached the colony planet. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans, green forests, and breathable air. The colonists prepared to land and begin their new lives. On the night before landing, the 6 boys stood at the observation deck with Neela, looking down at their future home. They held hands not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The stars stretched out above them, infinite and mysterious. "What do you think we'll do down there?" Hyunwoo asked. "Anything you want," Neela said. "You're free now. You can be whoever you want to be, do whatever you want to do. The universe is full of possibilities. Will you stay with us?" Seojin asked. "As long as you need me." "We'll always need you," Taehyun said simply. They stood there together, watching the planet rotate slowly below them. They were tired. It was late, well past their bedtime. But they stayed a little longer, savoring the moment. Tomorrow they would start a new life. But tonight they just wanted to be together. Finally, Doyen yawned. "I'm sleepy." "Me too," Minho agreed. "Let's go to bed," Junho suggested. The boys walked back to their quarters with Neela. They each went to their own rooms now, enjoying their independence. But they left their doors open so they could still hear each other, still feel connected. Neela said goodnight to each of them individually, tucking them in with care. When night fell on the colony planet the next day, after the landing, after the celebrations, after all the excitement of a new world, the 6 boys lay in their beds in the first house they had ever lived in that wasn't a